They say fear keeps men alive, but on the American frontier, fear also made men weak, slow, and predictable. And there was one man who broke that rule completely. A man who walked through gunfire with the calm of someone who already knew how his story would end. A man whose enemies realized too late that he was not fighting for survival, but for something far more dangerous: legacy. This is the true story of John Henry Doc Holliday, a dying dentist who became one of the most feared gunmen in the Old West. Not because he loved violence, but because he no longer feared death. Doc Holliday was born in 1851 in Georgia, into a world that looked nothing like the dusty hellscape that would later define him. He came from a respectable Southern family, educated, disciplined, raised with the expectation that he would live a quiet and successful life. He studied dentistry. He dressed well. He spoke with refinement. By every measure of society, he was meant to be a gentleman. But the Civil War tore through his childhood, leaving scars on the land and on the people. And by the time the guns fell silent, the South was a broken place, filled with pride, bitterness, and men trying to find their footing in a country that had shifted beneath them. It was not a bullet that changed Holliday's life. It was a diagnosis: tuberculosis. In the 19th century, it was not just a disease. It was a slow execution. Doctors told him plainly he would not live long. The air of the South would suffocate him. His lungs would fail. His future had an expiration date. Most men would have collapsed under that truth. Holliday did something else. He left. The American West was sold as a land of dry air and new beginnings, but for Doc Holliday, it became something far more symbolic. It was a place where time felt less certain, where reputation meant more than paperwork, where a man could decide what he was worth before death came to collect. Holliday did not run west to hide. He went to stare his fate in the face and decide what kind of man he would be when the end arrived. He arrived in towns filled with gamblers, outlaws, and drifters, and it did not take long for him to understand where he belonged. Dentistry was replaced by cards. Respectability was replaced by nerve. Holliday was brilliant with numbers, calm under pressure, and ruthless when challenged. Gambling was not just a way to earn money. It was a way to test men, to see who blinked, who hesitated, who lied, and those who crossed him soon discovered that behind the gentleman's manners was a man who would not tolerate disrespect, especially from men who assumed his illness made him weak. Doc Holliday did not seek fights, but he never avoided them. His temper was sharp, his wit cutting, and his loyalty unbreakable once given. When a man insulted him, the response was often swift and final. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew he was already dying, and that made him terrifying. You cannot threaten a man who has accepted the end. You cannot intimidate someone who has nothing to lose. This was the paradox of Doc Holliday. He was physically fragile, coughing blood, struggling to breathe on cold nights, yet emotionally unbreakable. While other men feared injury, he lived with it daily. While others feared the future, he had already been told he had none. And so he lived harder, spoke sharper, and drew faster than men who still believed they had decades ahead of them. It was in this world that he met Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was everything Holliday was not: healthy, disciplined, determined to build order out of chaos. Where Holliday embraced the uncertainty of the frontier, Earp tried to tame it. Their friendship was unlikely and powerful. Earp saw in Holliday a kind of courage that could not be trained. Holliday saw in Earp a code that gave meaning to survival. Together they formed one of the most famous partnerships in Western history. Not because they were alike, but because they completed each other. Holliday stood with Earp not out of obligation, but out of loyalty. In a world where alliances shifted as fast as gun barrels, loyalty was rare, and Holliday treated it like something sacred. When Earp was threatened, Holliday stepped forward. When Earp was hunted, Holliday did not hesitate. Because to a man who already lived under a death sentence, risking his life for a friend was not sacrifice, it was purpose. The American West is often remembered as a place of freedom, but for men like Holliday, it was a place of reckoning. Every day was a negotiation between who you were and who you chose to become before time ran out. Holliday chose to be fearless, not reckless, fearless. He did not believe he was immortal. He simply believed that if death was inevitable, then it would not be allowed to decide how he lived. That belief would soon pull him into the most infamous confrontation in frontier history, because the kind of man who does not fear death eventually finds himself standing in front of it. When Doc Holliday followed Wyatt Earp to Tombstone, Arizona, he did not walk into a town. He stepped into a pressure cooker built on greed, guns, and desperation. Tombstone was not famous because it was stable. It was famous because it was volatile. Silver had turned a patch of desert into a battlefield of ambition, drawing miners, gamblers, outlaws, and opportunists from every corner of the frontier. Where money rushed in, violence followed close behind, and law struggled to keep pace. For a man like Holliday, this chaos felt familiar. For a man like Wyatt Earp, it was a challenge. The Earps came to Tombstone with a vision of order. They believed that even in a place as wild as this, law could still stand if enforced with discipline and resolve. Holliday was not driven by that same idealism, but he understood something just as important. Without men willing to hold the line, chaos always wins. And so he stayed, coughing, gambling, and watching as tensions in the town began to rise like heat before a storm. The conflict centered around two forces that could not coexist. On one side stood the Earps and those aligned with them, men who believed the future of the West depended on law, property rights, and predictable rules. On the other side were the cowboys, a loose network of smugglers, rustlers, and outlaws who thrived in disorder. They were not just criminals, they were a culture built on intimidation, corruption, and the belief that no one had the authority to tell them how to live. Doc Holliday became an immediate target. The cowboys mocked his illness, underestimated his resolve, and assumed his coughing meant weakness. They were wrong. Holliday's reputation as a gunman preceded him, and when insults turned into threats, he responded the only way the frontier respected, without hesitation. A single confrontation in a saloon could ripple through the entire town, because when Holliday drew his weapon, people listened. Tombstone began to divide along invisible lines. Who you drank with, who you played cards with, who you stood next to when arguments escalated. Every interaction became political. Every disagreement carried the possibility of bloodshed. Wyatt Earp tried to mediate to enforce the law through arrests and warrants, but the cowboys resisted at every turn, backed by corrupt officials and a culture that saw authority as an enemy. Holliday, meanwhile, did not pretend neutrality. He was fiercely loyal to Earp. He saw the cowboys not just as criminals, but as predators who would destroy the town if left unchecked. His illness had taught him something few men learned. Time was precious, and wasting it on compromise was a luxury the dying could not afford. He confronted men directly. He challenged their bravado. And more than once, he made it clear that if violence was what they wanted, violence was what they would get. As the months passed, tensions escalated. Threats became open. Guns were carried more visibly. Men began to travel in groups. The atmosphere in Tombstone grew so thick with anticipation that even strangers could feel it. Something was coming. Everyone knew it. The only question was who would survive it. In the middle of this brewing storm, Holliday's health worsened. He coughed constantly. He lost weight. He bled, but he refused to leave. To him, running from Tombstone meant running from the one place where his life still had meaning. He had chosen his side, and he would stand with it even if it cost him what little time he had left. If this story is gripping you right now, take a moment to support it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you think drives a man more, fear of death or loyalty to a friend. Because in Tombstone, those two forces were about to collide. By late 1881, the line between law and outlaw had vanished. The cowboys openly threatened the Earps. The Earps prepared for confrontation. Holliday, increasingly frail but no less dangerous, stayed close to Wyatt. The town waited. The silver mines kept producing, the saloons kept pouring, and beneath it all, violence waited for an excuse. It would not wait long, because in a narrow strip of ground near a livery stable, history was about to be written in gunfire. By the morning of October 26, 1881, Tombstone was no longer a town. It was a loaded gun waiting for someone to pull the trigger. Every man who walked its dusty streets could feel it. Conversations were shorter. Hands rested closer to holsters. Eyes followed movement instead of faces. For weeks, threats had circulated, carried through saloons, whispered behind doors, and shouted in drunken rage. The cowboys and the Earps were no longer pretending that peace was possible. The only thing that remained undecided was who would walk away. Doc Holliday woke that day coughing blood. His lungs burned. His breath came in shallow, painful pulls. Yet when he dressed, he did so with the calm of a man who had already accepted his fate. Death was not new to him. It had been following him for years, waiting patiently. What mattered now was not how long he lived, but what he would do with what remained. He strapped on his gun, adjusted his coat, and stepped into the Arizona sun knowing something final was approaching. Wyatt Earp gathered his brothers and Holliday with quiet purpose. There were no speeches, no dramatic vows, just men who understood that law could not retreat again. The cowboys had violated ordinances, threatened lives, and challenged the authority of the town. To back down now would mean surrendering Tombstone to chaos. Wyatt's face was calm, but behind it was steel. He had decided that whatever happened next would end the standoff, one way or another. As the group walked toward Fremont Street, the streets seemed empty. People moved aside, windows closed. The entire town leaned away from what was coming, as if distance alone could protect them. The cowboys waited near the OK Corral, armed and defiant. They believed their numbers and reputation would carry the day. They did not understand the men approaching them. They did not understand Holliday. Doc Holliday did not look like a warrior. He was thin, pale, weak in body. But behind his eyes was something the cowboys could not see, the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose. He had stared death down for years. A gunfight did not scare him. Failing his friends did. When the two sides met, words were exchanged, orders were given, insults were thrown. And then, in a matter of seconds, the frontier erupted. Shots cracked through the air. Smoke filled the space between them. Men fell. Holliday moved with terrifying precision, his illness forgotten. His mind focused only on survival and loyalty. He fired without hesitation, covering Wyatt and the Earps as bullets tore through the narrow lot. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds, but those seconds would echo through American history. When it ended, the cowboys lay wounded and dying. The Earps and Holliday still stood. Tombstone, for the first time in months, was silent. Gunfight at the OK Corral was not just a clash of men. It was a collision of two futures, one built on law, one built on intimidation. A brief, violent moment. The law had held, but victory came at a price. The cowboys did not accept defeat. The courts became battlegrounds. The streets became ambushes. Holliday, already dying, now lived under constant threat. His enemies wanted revenge. His allies needed protection. The town remained unstable even after the gunfire stopped. Yet Holliday did not regret what he had done. He had chosen his side. He had stood where he believed he belonged. And in that choice, he had carved his place into the story of the West. But the frontier is not kind to those who make history, and the final cost of that day had not yet been paid. After the smoke cleared at the OK Corral, the American West did not become calmer. It became more dangerous. The gunfight had settled nothing. It had only forced every man in Tombstone to choose a side. The cowboys wanted revenge. The Earps were marked men. And Doc Holliday, already dying, found himself hunted not just by disease, but by enemies who would not rest until his blood joined the dust. Yet for Holliday, this only sharpened his resolve. A man who knows his time is short does not bargain with fear. He uses what remains. Holliday followed Wyatt Earp into what became known as the Vendetta Ride, a brutal campaign of pursuit and retaliation against those who attacked the Earp family. It was no longer law written on paper. It was law enforced by loyalty and steel. As the frontier dissolved into chaos once more, Holliday stayed by Earp's side, coughing, bleeding, barely able to breathe, yet still willing to draw his gun if anyone came close. This was not recklessness. It was devotion to a man who had been told he would die young. Standing for something was worth more than surviving quietly. The disease could not be outrun. Tuberculosis ate away at Holliday's strength as steadily as time itself. Every mile on horseback, every cold night, every gunshot pushed him closer to the end. And still, he refused to fade into the background. He traveled, gambled, and lived as if tomorrow were not promised, because for him it never had been. In 1887, Doc Holliday died in a hotel room in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. No guns, no enemies, No drama. Just a man finally reaching the end he had known was coming for over a decade. His final reported words were simple and almost amused. "This is funny." A man who had spent his life expecting to die violently found humor in the quietness of it. Holliday was buried far from Tombstone, far from the gunfight that made him famous. Yet his legacy remained where it had been forged, in the story of a man who chose courage over comfort, loyalty over safety, and purpose over fear. He was not a hero in the traditional sense. He was a flawed, sick, sharp-tongued gambler who refused to let death decide who he was. And that is why America remembers him. The Old West was not built by perfect men. It was built by those who stood when it would have been easier to run. Doc Holliday stood when his body was breaking. He stood when the odds were impossible. He stood because in a world drowning in chaos, he believed that loyalty was the last form of order. If this story moved you, take a moment now. Leave a like to support real American history told without myths. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of the men who shaped the frontier, and comment below. Do you think Doc Holliday was brave because he did not fear death? Or because he chose to live boldly despite it? Because legends are not born from comfort. They are born from men who refuse to kneel to fate.